Good morning. How you doing?
Sharp dressing contest now. I tell you, looking good.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this March 4th, 2020 meeting of the North Carolina State Board of Education. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. During the last month, our state lost two terrific supporters who fought for public education, former Lieutenant Governor Bob Jordan and North Carolina Representative Linda Johnson. Former Lieutenant Governor Jordan served on the State Board of Education from 1985 to 1989. And during his tenure on the board, he worked to improve education and opportunities for those less fortunate, championing the basic education program to provide equal access for all children, among his many contributions. And respectfully, Representative Linda Johnson served in the House for 19 years. She was the Senior Appropriations Chair and Co-Chair of the Joint Education Legislative Oversight Committee. She worked diligently championing for our public school students. These public school advocates will be missed, and we're thankful to each of them and their families for their numerous contributions. We extend our condolences to both of their families and a request that you join me now for a moment of silence in memory of these fierce leaders. Thank you. Over the past week, many concerns have surfaced over the potential spread of the respiratory illness coronavirus 19. The board shares in your concerns and will actively participate and share messages on any next course of action taken to protect our students. In the interim, we are actively partnering with the governor's office to increase awareness, preparedness measures for this virus, and we encourage all districts to ensure that schools are practicing good hand hygiene and taking common sense precautions to prevent the spread of illnesses, to protect students, educators, and other employees. I now welcome board members and advisors, staff, on-site visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. For our visitors and those listening online, today's agenda involves our board committee sessions, and tomorrow's agenda is the official meeting when the board will vote on its action items. Board members are reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflicts of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record, and if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Board members, you've seen the agenda for our meeting today for over a week and had an opportunity to review it. Excuse me. Yes, Treasurer. Oh, Mr. Ford.
Contract with that district.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Record reflect that Mr. Ford recuses himself from EICS 6. Any other items? Thank you, Mr. Ford. Board members, you've seen the agenda for over a week and had the opportunity to review it. I ask if there are any requests for changes to the agenda. Seeing none, I request a motion for approval.
Move approval.
Motion by Ms. White. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Buxton. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor,
Yes.
Vice Chair,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Thank you. We have an agenda. We'll now proceed to our committee meetings, and we'll begin with the Special Committee on Digital Learning and Computer Sciences. And I call on Lieutenant Governor Forrest to begin this committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as we've presented before on computer science, I think everybody in this room understands the seriousness of the issue that is in front of us as it relates to speed to market for computer science within all of our schools across North Carolina, but especially now our high schools and middle schools. And as we began this process, as a reminder, just a couple short years ago, at the time, there were about 15,000 computer science jobs on the market in North Carolina alone, and now there's roughly 30,000 month over month in North Carolina. And so this, the pace of change in the marketplace related to computer science stays the same, and it's growing. And our ability to meet the needs of the pipeline within K-12 is now starting to grow, because what we did was expedite the process for standards. So what I'd like to do as we move forward here, and Dr. Hemphill is going to walk through this process, but we took a process that could take 5 to 7 years normally to create standards, and we did that entire process with folks from the private sector and the public sector, folks from DPI and Friday Institute coming together to create this set of standards for the state board to review, and we did it in a year or less than a year. So we expedited that process. And the reason I'm telling you that is because I think in the economy we live in and the world we live in, we're going to see these things pop up in the market that we're going to need to address very quickly. And we don't have years to respond. We're going to have months to respond. And so our ability to do this in a very nimble and flexible way is going to be really important to the board, obviously, but the folks at DPI, to give them the tools to do that, but more importantly to our students, so that we can start providing the training and the teaching that they need for the jobs that are even on the market today. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about here, and I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Hemphill to tell you about what's going on with this initiative. So Dr. Hemphill, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. Chairman Davis, Superintendent Johnson, and esteemed members of the board, we are very excited about the work and the journey that we have been on with computer science over the past almost 13 months. Today at 5 o'clock, we will be releasing the first set of proposed computer science standards for public comment. So in January of 2019, the CS Steering Committee came together under the Special Committee for Digital Learning and started the work of bringing national leaders, state leaders, and local leaders together with their expertise on computer science to begin looking at the CSTA standards. And through that work, in April of 2019, the Computer Science Department here at DPI began a reiterative process of mobilizing and developing the standards writing and review committees under the guidance of State Board Policy SCOS 012, which states that the process for completing as well as revising standards should be feedback-based, research-informed, improvement-oriented, and process-driven. We are grateful that over the past 11 months, across all 8 regions of North Carolina, we have brought together 56 teacher leaders, 9 school leaders, 16 district leaders, 15 curriculum leaders, and over 32 external stakeholders, not only in North Carolina and across our country, but also internationally in Australia and Ireland, to give feedback. And as we vet those CSTA standards for North Carolina, it has been a truly differentiated process. Over 1,000 person hours, as well as research and iteration and vetting of those standards, has gone into place. And so today we will unveil the proposed standards for North Carolina in computer science. Over the next 30 days, we will monitor this process closely and then use that feedback to make any necessary changes, revisions, and edits. And next month, we are excited to present them to you, the State Board, for adoption as the first set of computer science standards in the state of North Carolina. We would not be able to do this work without cross-sector collaboration of the many departments here at DPI, the Lieutenant Governor's Office, support from our Superintendent's Office, and of course the State Board, as well as multiple external stakeholders who have made this work possible. One critical partner has been the Friday Institute, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dave Fry, who is the Senior Director of Computer Science Initiatives, who will bring to you information regarding the first CS landscape map that has been developed in the past 3 years. Without further ado, Dave Fry.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for taking time to listen about our work. We're very excited to share some of the things we were able to accomplish recently around computer science. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our process and where we've gotten to where we are in terms of a landscape map. One of the things we know about computer science is that it isn't its own discipline. Right, so often in math, we can say, what are all the things we do in math? Well, we have course codes and structures and things like that in place. We don't yet have that for computer science as a new content area. So in long-term discussions over the last year with Mary and her team and others around the state, the realization that we need some kind of baseline data for that. And where that starts is a kind of a profile of where computer science is happening, what students are taking those courses, and in some ways it becomes a great tool for all of us to figure out what we need to do and what we can do. The other piece that came up through this process is that we don't have a shared understanding of what a CS course is. So our team spent a good deal of time trying to figure out exactly that, because different people think different things are computer science courses, and that is different than just thinking about what computer science is. So we landed on this interactive map, which is in its first phase, and it's a pretty exciting tool that I think will be useful for all of us. So as we mentioned, there's a computer science steering committee last year, and during the process of creating standards, we came up with a shared definition for what computer science is, which is the study of algorithmic processes and computing systems, their principles, their hardware, software designs, their applications, and their impact on society. And that is a mouthful. But really, it is about the science of computing and understanding how the computers work, not just using the computers. So we took that a step further and said, how do we make some sense out of what a computer science course might be? And we spent a lot of time looking at different courses, and what we came up with was this idea that in the standards, there are both core concepts and core practices. These are fundamental things that are accepted around the state and the country on what computer science looks like in practice. So we believe that courses must engage students in those concepts and practices, and at a decent level of depth, not just a kind of a one-off lesson. So the process, a little bit of how we've figured out what these courses are, and I'm getting to a map that will identify exactly what courses and where they are and how many kids are enrolled in them, so that's the reason for this kind of process. We started with the course catalog, and yes, the whole course catalog. We put everything in 3 categories. This is definitely not a computer science course. It has the potential to be a computer science course, or it definitely is a computer science course. That allowed us to rule out about 90% of the courses, obviously, very quickly, but it still was a task to get through that whole course catalog. In the potential and definitely categories, we looked into further details of those courses. So in the CTE space, we have blueprints. We looked at curriculum online. We looked even at teacher web pages. What are those teachers actually teaching, and what does that course look like? That actually became one of the best sources of data for us, as so many teachers have their courses and curriculum online. We're able to search the course code. We get 40 or 50 teachers' examples of what they're teaching that year. So it gave us a good insight on what, not only what's written that should happen, but what actually happens in the classroom. We went through a number of cycles with our team and others, kind of individual research, group reviews, bouncing back and forth to continue to refine this. It's probably not done yet. I think there are more refinement that can be done, and national groups are starting to define these as well. There was just a report that came out last week that explains a new version of what people think computer science courses are and are not, and coding versus not coding. So we'll continue to evolve this as new information comes out. So in our process, we had this inclusion criteria, things that were computer science courses. The emphasis of the course has to be on core concepts of computer science, not just there happens to be a computer science lesson in there. The students are actively involved in applying that. It's not just teachers reading to them or telling them definitions. But we also identified that it doesn't have to cover all aspects of the standards. Obviously, that would be near impossible. There's some exclusion criteria we came up with as well. Limited application or use of a core concept. So if there's a history course that happens to talk about in one lesson that the impact of computing has changed the way people interact, that likely is not a good enough criteria for a computer science course unless there's more active involvement with the students. If the course doesn't involve programming or algorithms, we felt like that was a critical component of all of this. So without those involved, there must be some kind of significant evidence that the course really focuses on the rest of computer science. Again, that application around history. If there's no programming or algorithms, we need to understand how much of that is really a history course that happens to mention computer science versus a computer science course that looks at history. And last but not least, the exclusion criteria. we learned that just using a particular software application is not sufficient to be a computer science course either. There are a lot of times where we think that's the case. There are opportunities for that to happen, but just the use of it's not enough. It's how that is used and at what depth. So a little bit about our map. I'm going to get creative here and something over here. It's magic. Magic on my screen. For me, it's magic. For y'all, it's less than magic. Do y'all see not a slide up there? Because on the big screen, I'm seeing.
The same thing up there that you see.
Okay. I need this to project. We have a website here that you can't see. That picture you have in front of you is just a screen cap of the live map.
Well, Dave, for the sake of time, let's just
Yep.
move on and assume it's live and we can
Yeah, a couple.
use our
here it is.
imagination.
Yep. And my apologies here. What I want to show you quickly is this is data from spring 2018. It is our most current data that we had as we were building the map. It will be updated with more data. You'll see that 2% of the students in our state take a computer science course. And what we did, we built this out not only by grade level, but also by gender, ethnicity, and the type of courses. In here, there's also these red lines, which are benchmarks. So for instance, we see that we have the red lines show our breakdown of female and male students in the state, and that is the blue lines are the computer science enrollments. So we're lacking in the female side. What we also did then is took this and built out district by district, so you can see some of the districts and how. Anyway, as you click on each county, everything updates and gives you those same numbers. So it gives us a good quick look at what's happening, what types of courses are happening, how those enrollments are happening, and as we always talk about, every student needs to have that opportunity. And this is some real data to show if we're actually reaching all the students or if it's just reaching those students who are always going to take computer science or are naturally inclined to do so. So next phases. We have additional data we want to integrate in that, and there's a lot of data out there, but at first we want this map to be up there and useful. There will be other years of data, so we can look at longitudinal pieces. There's other data sources like AP data and scores on AP tests, which is a great marker of how well we're doing, but it's not in there yet, mostly because it's an enormous database and we wanted to get this tool up and running. The last piece we have is we have another map that we've built around CS teacher data and training those, and we want to start to integrate those along with other third-party solutions. There's a group called Family Code Night that is running a statewide program and bringing evening events to families at night. We want to leverage those and map those together. The other things that are up next are rolling out and usage, making sure everybody sees this, understand what it's used for, giving some capacity building to use it, and then continuing to give that feedback of what they wish they could see in that map. And then the last is our continuous improvement process, which is making sure that as that data shows up, there's no real red flags or anomalies in what's going on. When we see some district that has 100% of their Hispanic students taking computer science classes, we will be checking with them to see if that's right or if it's bad data. And we've actually run into some of those problems already. So I think that's about all for now.
Dave, let's
yeah.
just briefly hit on CS for NC as well, if you would, please. 'cause,
Certainly.
yeah.
Out of the steering committee, we've been fortunate to have some business leaders who have taken the charge to support this initiative and strengthen our teacher workforce. So over the last 90 days, we've been rolling out a public-private partnership led by a couple of those business leaders. It has a website now at csfornc.org. The intent is that businesses should take ownership and provide funding to support some of our teachers as well as relationships with their employees. And it seems to be well received so far for a 90-day run. We've heard a lot from a lot of the financial tech industries, the big companies that work in the obvious tech space, but also a lot of the small companies around the state. One of the big ones we've been happy about is there's a small software company out of Western North Carolina, Drake Industries, and they're very interested in investing in their 5 counties. and helping their people. And it's a workforce pipeline solution for them, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for community engagement for their employees to connect with schools and to kind of create new opportunities and help people see that this is a job they can go into. So we're excited. We've been in Charlotte and Asheville and Raleigh so far, meeting with the companies. And then the next meeting will be in the Wilmington area. So moving around the state, campaigning, getting people to have ownership, I think, is the most critical piece, while funding is an important piece as well. This idea that they own this and it's part of what they do in their community is helping to localize it and will really make a difference.
Yeah, so go out and check out the CS number 4 NC website and tell your friends about it too, because I think that's part of the important thing is we're going around and meeting with people in these communities and just making them aware that they have an opportunity to actually, as Dave said, invest in either a county. They could, if it's a small county, a company may adopt the entire county to get every school up to speed, or they may say, I'm going to adopt a school, which may be a teacher or two, or they just, you could say, adopt a teacher and actually fund that teacher. So it makes it real tangible for the people that are on the ground to see what their dollars are actually going for. And obviously, we see this kind of as a immediate stopgap measure when we don't have the budget to fund all the training that's going on. I think we'll get that pretty quickly, but to have buy-in from the business community, I think is great too. So thank you for that, Dave.
Certainly.
We appreciate that.
Yep.
And then just one other note, as we kind of move forward with this and the rollout of this, we are training, Friday Institute and Dr. Hemphill are training teachers on a regular basis. So we're much further along than we were on the teacher training side. And some teachers are actually opting in to do this voluntarily, and some are being voluntold. And they're kind of across the state. It's a little bit different, but we're seeing this ramp up pretty quickly across the state, which is really good, but we have a long way to go. So we need all of your help just letting people know what's happening. And then for me anyway, I'm not speaking for Dave really or Dr. Hemphill here, but for me, I would like to see a next phase for the state board to talk about how we move computer science and make computer science a math or a science. How can we do that so it's not just an elective course that students take, that we want to look at, say, how can they kind of bring this into their studies as a math or a science and get credit for it. And we're already started working with the Board of Governors on that so that the college credit piece will be there when they do that. Okay? Yes, sir.
So Chair Forrest and Dr. Fry, Dr. Hemphill, I am so excited about the Computer Science Initiative in North Carolina. My friend Mariah Moores here has been championing that with the IMCS movement, and there's just so much positive energy. And when we look at a state like North Carolina, we ought to be right out front doing this kind of innovative work. So I had a probing question in looking at the metrics that you were identifying, deep appreciation for trying to establish what our current reality is in North Carolina for the implementation of computer science. I noticed we had metrics for gender, we had metrics for ethnicity, and of course we have the geographic reference with the state. Do you anticipate adding a metric for poverty, for students of poverty or students that are in Tier 1 counties, so that as we're looking at the ongoing implementation of the Computer Science Initiative, we're able to track to what degree the implementation is spread across all 100 counties that we have? Not only because I think it's important that we kind of keep our fingers on the pulse of that, but also because when we're looking at external partners and they're trying to figure out what kind of energy they can devote to the topic, I think there might be an interest in measuring our impact in our 40 poorest counties and making sure that we're not actually creating opportunity gaps with computer science, but we're actually proactively moving through this in a comprehensive way to make sure that we don't have opportunity gaps. So I just wondered if that might be a metric that might appear on your dashboard at some point, as we're looking at this very exciting initiative.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky metric. One of the things we try to do with dashboards is make them accessible. So if there's too many overlays, it becomes too much information. I think there is a SES map or tab that will be added. We've used that with a bunch of the industry partners. We've recently been invited by Credit Suisse to submit a proposal that they don't invite too many people to submit to support, in particular, Tier 1 counties, because they had that interest. So
Might be interesting to take the Department of Commerce's economically distressed
Yep,
county
that's what it
rating
is,
and
yeah.
just overlay that with
Absolutely.
the implementation of the computer science initiative, so we could just kind of see geographically where are we actually implementing.
And you can see it on this map too, right? The one he was showing, that data we already have, all those white spots on there that have 0 computer science classes being taught in them are generally the poorer counties. And so I think you can already start to see where that's going with the demographics that we already happen to know. And I think part of this is, a lot of things are kind of dovetailing really nicely right now. So, the process that we went through with digital learning, then the connectivity component, getting every classroom connected to broadband, which then gives you abilities that you never had, even without having a teacher in that school, but a facilitator perhaps to be able to, do these things in these, whatever it happens to be. These things are happening, and we not only, they'll talk about a grant here in a second, but, the linkage between K-12 and the community college and the university system. We'll talk about that a little bit here with the School of Science and Math. So I think you're starting to see some things come together that I think are going to be a distinct advantage to especially the poorer rural communities. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome work. You guys know I'm one of your biggest fans. As I travel around the state, I promote the Computer Science Initiative in my keynote talk that I give to beginning teachers as well as students in colleges of education and EPPs. And they are very excited and enthusiastic, but they tell me they're not receiving any sort of education on this in their EPP coursework. And so I would just like to put that out there so that that's on our radar, that we really need to be intentional, especially when you look at K-5 education, the elementary background. If we want to start building capacity for our students in this flexible, forward-thinking, innovative thinking model, it's going to be in K-5. And the traditional elementary coursework, it's pretty much non-existent. And then my second comment as I go around to schools, when we're looking at who is taking computer science classes, that's looking at who's enrolled, not who's being successful. And if we want to look at who's being enrolled, we need to provide some really intentional PD to guidance counselors. Because a lot of our guidance counselors are trained in social emotional learning, in social work type things, but they're not trained in computer science. And so it's this kind of field that's like, I don't really know what that is. So if a kid has interest, they might get pushed in, but they're not intentionally targeting different subgroups with that.
Yeah, both great comments. Thank you.
Just
Dr.
to your
Hempel.
point, when we did the first cycle of writing and standards review, we wanted to make sure that elementary teachers saw themselves in this work. So we worked through November and December to bring specifically 32 K-5 teachers from across the state together for 2 days of truly digging into an iterative process of saying, when you look at this computer science standard and networks and impacts on computing or cybersecurity or data and algorithms, where does it show up authentically, and where is there a natural learning opportunity in ELA, math, science, or social studies? And we're grateful to Christy Ebert and the Curriculum and Instruction Department, because section chiefs from each of those content areas were able to guide those teams and lead those teams. So at the end of this work, we will have a truly integrated K through 5 crosswalk where it will take the computer science standard and walk it across into content areas. The teachers have also done the work over the past 4 weeks to find lesson plans from code.org, Project Lead the Way, and different common creative licensing curriculum, so we can have, for K-5 teachers specifically, lesson plans that are ready to go that meet the North Carolina Standard Course of Studies.
And what I love about both of your comments is that you guys get it on the ground, the principals and the teachers, you understand really where the gaps are. That doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it's industry hammering us saying, how come we're not getting this thing? But you guys really get it, and that's what's gonna expedite this thing, is what's coming back at us from you saying, here's what we really need, so you know where the gaps are, and these folks are gonna work to fill those. Yeah, but thank you.
If I
Yes,
can
sir.
add one
Mr.
more
Buxton.
comment. We've seen the same thing in schools of education. I actually work in a school of education or college of education. There's lots of interest, and I don't think it's a priority yet. I think getting at what you're saying, the teachers that are being prepared don't see that yet, because in reality they have to run their colleges, right? So somewhere we've got to figure out a way where there's a little bit of a carrot, a little bit of stick, to get colleges of education to have to engage in this. As somebody who works in one and knows we have a busy schedule already. So I think everyone's saying it's a good idea. It's just not necessarily all the way to the top. So it'll be something, I think, once standards hit, that'll shift some of the thinking, but I think there's an opportunity for us to move that forward.
Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Governor Forrest. This may be in the plan that y'all have presented prior, and my apologies if I don't remember it. If I'm a student in high school, will future phases of this build out create course pathways that plug directly into credentials and degrees, value, post-secondary? So we'll have kind of seamless articulation.
So we have worked closely with the CTE department. We have Karen McPherson and Linda Lay, who are your CSIT consultants for the field. And when we talk about computer science pathways and courses, there's a plethora that are not only being developed, but will be there when students hit ninth grade and are able to start picking those pathways. Lots of computer science opportunities throughout the different VR, artificial intelligence, which we'll talk about in a minute, cybersecurity, Adobe SAS, all of those will still be available to students, and even more robust as we start looking at the standards, because now these courses will be undergirded by the vetted standards for the standard course of study.
Just quick follow-up. So if we think about something like cybersecurity, which you've mentioned a couple of times, and we backwards map that to the kind of degrees that you need to move into that field, and how coursework in high school would plug directly into programs of study in university, that's the articulation that I'm wondering about. Or if it's going to be, you take some courses, and then you move into post-secondary, and there's something disconnected.
I think that conversation is going to continue, but what I do believe is that as we start to look at K through 8, we're arming students to have a great foundation to be able to go in high school and have these conversations. Having external partners who can truly talk to us about what employees need when they graduate from high school is going to be critical as we continue to develop this conversation. And so we're gonna have to ensure that CS and CTE are really working hard together to make sure that students have what they need to be successful when they get there.
Okay, so last thought, because I think this is really exciting. There are places like Kentucky where you can start earning nursing credentials in high school, and it counts, and then it builds, and you don't have to go through 6 to 8 years of what you do in high school counts, and you have, it seems like we could create a course pathway starting in high school, and you would crunch the post-secondary time way down to have access into, and so you would essentially blur the line. You would have access directly into the workforce.
Articulation agreement.
Yeah, so one piece, the person who's helping to lead this business alliance, Tom Looney, he is the chair at Wake Tech, and he has forced us and pushed us to have this conversation because there's a obvious piece there. One is CCP, like we need to dig into CCP and add more computer science courses. The other is a number of businesses like IBM and Lenovo have already talked about, they have credentials. Why can't we be giving those credentials to kids in high school? And then potentially even hiring out of high school if we have people with sufficient credentials. So I think there's interest in a lot of spaces. I think we come back to always that interstitial tissue. What makes it really come to happen and market it and so on and so forth. But yes, that's the necessary step to make sure that we're really pipelining all kids and giving them good opportunities.
For instance, Microsoft has opened up their Raleigh campus on March 30th and April 30th. They are hosting North Carolina middle school girls to spend the day with their executives in problem-based learning to find out what it is to be a day in the life of an engineer or software developer. And so it's going to take people stepping to the plate like that for early positive experiences with computer science in terms of what it could look like for their career after they get to high school and then on into their economic development years.
Mrs. White?
So my follow was particularly about development of middle school preparedness. Having worked within a program in the summer that's a career pathway program for students who maybe wouldn't have the knowledge that all of us would have about all of the different careers that are available to today's developing workforce. How critical educating 6th, 7th, and 8th graders about the skills necessary to be able to, high school is such a crunch time. You have to cram it all in. We can't wait till 9th grade. So it occurs to me that as we look at developing this, that by 8th grade, we should have a list of, I'm going to call them foundations, necessary skills that would be in place for our 8th graders statewide, that they might then be able to be prepared to start taking those upper level courses. So development of an 8th grade foundation.
I love that suggestion. And right now, Computer Science Discoveries is available for middle schools, but it is a local decision as to whether or not to offer that. Computer Science Discoveries is just one pathway into really exposing our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to a good foundation of what computer science can offer and computational thinking particularly.
Well, just following real quick, having seen elementary age children do coding in hands-on exercising, we have students that are bright, that are capable, and we live in a digital world, and if we wait until high school to load them with that, we are too late. And so the earlier, the better.
So, Ms. White, as a follow-up, one of the things that is so exciting about computer science in particular is that this is the kind of program that once you build those foundational skills, kids just sort of develop a life of their own. They develop this energy and they kind of become their own computer scientists, where we're trying to keep up with them instead of them trying to keep up with us. And so the potential for this kind of education to be asynchronous, to fill in nights and weekends when kids don't have anything to do, for them to fill in summer blocks of time, which many traditional school systems don't have much to do during the summertime for children. Building those credentials, a pathway for post-secondary, it doesn't have to happen between 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And so once that kind of vertical alignment from K-8 happens, I feel quite sure that if we just if we just build it, they will come, right? So.
Yeah, great conversation and great energy. Thank you all. I think this is going to be fun as we move forward, and we're going to see some real life application for these students that exist today in the market. Mr. Buxton, thank you for your comments related to that, because I think that's critical to this conversation too. And but for the sake of time, we have one more piece of this, and we're already a little bit behind. So, Dr. Hemphill, if you can move us forward.
So as we continue our conversation with computer science, it is a living and breathing framework. And so we are honored to have Charlotte Duncan, who is an artificial intelligence architect from the North Carolina School of Science and Math, who for the past few months has been serving on the National Steering Committee for Artificial Intelligence. She is not only a #IMCS ambassador under the #IamAI, but she has also been a member of our standards writing and review teams, who brought such great insight and perspective to the guiding principles that will be included in the standards. North Carolina will be, as of April, after we adopt the standards, the first state in the country that will have guiding principles for artificial intelligence, because it is something that our students and our teachers and our world grapple with on a daily basis. She is joined today by Todd Roberts, the Chancellor for the North Carolina School of Science and Math, Brock Winslow, Vice Chancellor for Institutional Advancement, Joe Labulio, Executive Director for the Write-In Program of Innovation and Leadership in AI, as well as Angela Tichy, Director of Academic Programs.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Duncan, and I'm so pleased to be here. I was really nervous until I heard that conversation and I realized that we're actually all on the same page. We want the best for our students. We want to make sure we serve low-income students, that we reach K-5, that we reach girls by 6th grade, that they believe they're empowered. And so now I'm coming to tell you about AI and how we prepare teachers and students for this technology that many of you may not know anything about. Or maybe I pushed the wrong button. Let's see. There we are. So artificial intelligence, we often abbreviate as AI, and it's a part of computer science that focuses on making machines capable of performing tasks that humans normally do. This is done through algorithms that solve problems. Once a computer programmer tells them what they want the outcome to be, the computer can find its own path to finding the solution. AI is embedded in a lot of other subjects. It's not simply a part of computer science, it's a part of humanities. We look at an ancient text and we can use an algorithm to decode it with and see, like, where was it in history? We can actually date it based on the language patterns that are found. We can look at historical trends in economics, for example, and we can use this AI in mathematics. I mean, data science basically uses AI all the time now, statistical analysis, probability, and science. Many of the advances in medicine right now, if you know someone who's had cancer, we can now tailor cancer treatment and get more accurate results in cancer screening by using AI algorithms, so that our technicians aren't looking at hundreds and hundreds of slides every day. Humans get tired. AI algorithms don't, and so they can sort out all of those negatives right away and have the humans only look at the questionable results. We find that AI plus human is the most accurate in these types of scenarios. So AI is all around you. It affects every American already. Most of us don't know it. We use AI algorithms for our weather forecasting. We use AI to ensure that our tractors drive in the same line that they planted when they harvest, so we lose less crops. We can water and fertilize strategically. We can watch our entertainment on Netflix and get the shows that we want to watch. We can see posts and ads of things that we care about. We can listen to music that we want to listen to. Those happen through AI. Recommender systems recommend things to us all the time. Our financial markets are also artificial intelligence. So investments have always been something that you think about, like from 9 to 5, and there's a gavel, but actually there's a satellite going over the Best Buy parking lot, and investors are looking at how many cars are in the parking lot and analyzing whether or not that stock might go up or down based on how many cars they see in those parking lots. When you decide to have you purchase a new home and your rate from your old home actually went down even though you bought a bigger house, well, that's because your risk assessment for that insurance is very tailored to specifically where you live and the crime patterns that we can see dynamically using AI. And finally, your rate of your mortgage is related to your credit score, but it's also related to other factors about people like you and whether or not you're likely to continue making payments on time. We also see these algorithms in predictive policing, where certain neighborhoods, specifically certain streets, are sent police officers, which of course then they find more crime in those areas where the police officers are sent. And sentencing guidelines are used often with some bias on who is recommended to go to jail or be released. These algorithms are also being placed in foster care to ensure that a social worker is required to follow up with certain types of families versus having it solely be in the power of the person. You can already see how AI is all around us and no one is regulating this. So yet, I think we're getting there. But there are concerns about privacy and security, about how we're going to use facial recognition as we walk through airports, about whether or not your credit card company can track your purchases and what they do with that information as they learn what type of purchaser you are. We think in transportation that just like airplanes in 2017, there were no commercial airline crashes in the world, 0 deaths, because airlines are almost entirely flown by AI. There is someone there that's helping the takeoffs and the landing, but mostly it's a autonomous system. There are train systems in the world where there's no people at all. They're only controlled by computers, and that's because people get tired, people get distracted, and we see this most often in cars. So you've probably heard about self-driving cars, and maybe you've seen a Super Bowl ad where the car parks itself. We think that once cars are driving autonomously, 400,000 lives a year will be saved. So AI is important for the security and safety, and we need to make sure that we have natural privacy laws in place too. Also in education, personalization is coming. An algorithm can determine if you need more practice on a certain type of math problem or if you're ready to move on. This allows differentiation in the classroom quite naturally and allows for remediation that doesn't feel like extra work. It's just part of what your assignment is for that day. AI can be used for teachers for some assignments that can be auto-graded and for analyzing assessment data. Finally, AI is used in language translation and in natural interaction. So a system can tell how I'm feeling, and we can actually use that in the classroom to tell whether or not students are engaged. Some of those systems are already in place in Chinese schools. So there's some misconceptions and realities about AI. The first is probably the job market. We will see some job loss due to robotics, for example, that are getting better at picking up items and moving them around. But we'll see in North Carolina in particular an explosion in tech jobs. We are poised to give students the knowledge and skills to be the leaders in the job market. And North Carolina will be one of those states. We can be worried about privacy. I think this is a concern of people that maybe where is your data going? It is being used across multiple sites. So if you have ever written an email and then you've seen an ad for something later on your Google search results or in your social media, that's real. Those systems are sharing data, and data aggregation companies are big business, trillions of dollars. So we need laws and legislation. There is some misconception about what's being controlled. We do need to make sure that bias is not a part of the algorithms that we create and that everyone is treated fairly in the algorithms that we create. We want to make sure that the systems we create do actually promote safety and security for all citizens, and that they're not unfairly targeting certain types of people, and that that we are safer because of the systems that we can put in place. I put this picture of the ATM up here because maybe you're thinking like, well, I've used an ATM for a long time. But the banking world has completely changed since an ATM came on the market. When the ATM first came out, people were really worried that tellers were going to be out of jobs, and that this was going to be you're going to drive up, you're going to forget your card, somebody's going to get that card, and all your money's going to be spent. And it turns out now that most of us probably do our banking electronically. We can see our statement right away. We can see that deposit much more quickly. We don't have to worry about losing a check. The same type of thing is going to happen in the whole world. So remember when we did business before computers were at every desk? You remember when we had a cell phone and it just made phone calls, right? And the way that we do business has changed. So I don't want you to be afraid of AI. I want you to think of it as a tool. And it's a tool that's going to revolutionize all the other sectors of society. It's like that ATM, we still have ATMs, but the tellers are also still in the banks. So don't be afraid. But I do want you to notice the last one, which is US dominance. We are not dominant in artificial intelligence. That would be China and India. And they have a lot of citizens. So it's time for us to catch up. I believe North Carolina will be a leader in that effort. So here's what we're doing. We're teaching students about sensors and perception. These students you see here are 5th and 6th graders learning about artificial intelligence with tiny little robots that cost under $200. We teach them about how our senses can be mimicked by computers, and that the sensory data is perceived in a certain way that we can process by building a representation. A good representation that you've probably used is a Google map. It's not the real world. It doesn't show every feature of every street that you drive down, but it's a really important representation because it can help you travel on public transit. It can help you travel on a bicycle, and it'll give you a different route depending on which type of data you need. That's the reasoning that can be applied. We can even see whether or not there's traffic by a red line or an orange line on that map. That's because these systems learn from data, and they interact very naturally with us. So you can talk to your phone. If I do it, my phone will probably say, but you can say, hey, Google, take me to the State Board of Education, and it will. It talks to us, and it knows how we're feeling. And finally, and most importantly, we need to make sure that students know that technology has ethics built into it, and that we need to have students be the makers and creators of that technology so that they can embed their own values that represent all of our citizenry. So the 5 big ideas are a part of the organization that I'm a part of is AI for K-12. We're building national guidelines to sit alongside the computer science standards, and they are the 5 big ideas that I just talked about. We know from experience, the CSTA experience, that 5 is a good number. It's not too big, it's not too small, and it's a way that teachers can present material in their classrooms. So my school, the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, is committed to equitable AI education for every North Carolina student. We particularly target Title I schools, and we serve them in multiple modalities. My particular program is focused on AI. There are several of us in the department. We have a director, myself, an educator advocate who is specifically interested in providing teacher-to-teacher contact, to providing what teachers say they need directly to teachers, and we have an instructional designer who's going to build curriculum and resources to make sure that what teachers need is what they get in this area. We're offering free online professional development in AI for K-12 that is embedded in the subject specifically. So we teach kindergartners about our senses, and we'll talk about those in relation to sensors. That lesson will go right alongside. They don't need to add another class. It's just built right into their day. We're going to make sure that they have curricular resources that are aligned to standards with integration in K-8, as well as a full class in 9th grade, which we're piloting right now in schools across the state. We are in Transylvania County, we're in Alamance County, and we're in Dare County. Right now, teaching students in a class called Honors Intro to AI. So I'm very fortunate to teach students in our state. We also have summer education camps for teachers and in-person professional development available in locations statewide. We don't expect people to come to Durham. We're coming to you. We also have outreach events and opportunities. We're hosting a high school AI ethics and leadership conference this October, and we're excited to have students across the state join us for that. We have a newsletter available, social media channels that will continually provide resources and learning opportunities for teachers. And most importantly, we have thoughtful, multimodal support for teachers that are new to computer science and artificial intelligence. We know teachers don't know this, they weren't trained in it in their program, and that of course we're bringing them from ground zero. So we're standing up a website, aiforteachers.org. It is in development right now. It is going live this spring, which will have a resource repository created by education professionals themselves that can be contributed to, it can be modified, it can be shared, and everything will be searchable and licensed with Creative Commons so teachers can change it and make it their own. We'll have modern discussion forums where they can interact with one another and support one another as they're doing this hard new work. We're using social media platforms, and we're also creating online interactive models for teachers to deploy in their classroom. So they have a tool to actually show students and then have the students use as they learn about this technology. We're going to show national competitions. We're going to show what teachers are doing. We're going to feature teachers. We're going to show what work is happening across our state and celebrate, right, the great work that happens across our LEAs. Here's an example of a curriculum package that we put
Ms.
together.
Duncan, if I may, just if you'll do this kind of quickly, sorry, but we're kind of running behind time, so if you'll just hit the highlights on this and we'll keep going. Thank you.
Will do. We have whole curricular packages. This one's for 7th to 9th grade about ethics and bias in AI using a board game. We also have professional development online, developing right now, available in May, with some pilot in March, where teachers can take classes online, get certification for that. It's also a choose your own adventure game. And we're doing AI around the state already. Part of AI, I just want to point out a spelling mistake. I wrote Sansom. The girl in that picture is Jaden Sansom, and we're in Sampson County, where we've done AI presentations and teacher support. And we also have an AI research student. We offer student AI courses already. Our commitment, our school's commitment, is to reach 100,000 teachers and 1 million students. That is a part of our strategic objective. And these are some of our partners. The MIT Teaching Systems Lab I want to highlight in particular because we've developed a teacher training practice space so that teachers can navigate the difficulty of trying to teach something that they're not fully confident in. And how do you do that when some student knows more than you, or you don't know the answers to all of their questions? And so we've built some practice spaces for teachers to interact with that before it happens in real life. We have about 12 of those scenarios that help them navigate all different kinds of contexts, including students who might feel like they don't belong because they look a certain way. We're looking to expand this across the nation, but it will always be free to North Carolina teachers. We also partner with the NC Science Festival. So here's what you can do. Put us forth in your networks as a place where teachers can come get professional development and curriculum. Recommend those champions in your districts. We know they're there. That we need teacher partners. We need districts that want to do this curriculum development alongside us, and then share the importance of comprehensive AI education that will benefit our citizens in North Carolina. Share that importance.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Great, passionate presentation. Thanks for all you do. I mean, one of the things that you probably, if you're not around the School of Science and Math and you see the work that Ms. Duncan does, really much of it by herself there and leading that effort for AI, it's pretty incredible to think of the amount of impact that one person can have there. But you know, let's not take for granted the excellent work that the School of Science and Math does. It's one of the bright spots in the entire nation when it comes to education. Let's continue to lift that up. It is part of the university system and not the K-12 system, but it's our responsibility to tell everybody what a bright spot that is. And related to AI, Carl Rydeen has made this possible to do this at the School of Science and Math with a very generous grant. And so we have that grant, we have the work that Ms. Hempel was talking about related to K-12 and AI, and then we have a grant that we just worked on with the Friday Institute through the Department of Labor as well that we just rolled out 2 weeks ago at NC State for AI related to apprenticeships at AI in the School of Education. So North Carolina is an AI leader. Right now already is an AI leader. We have a long way to go. But with that, Ms. Duncan, thank you very much for your time. Ms. Hempel, are you going to wrap this thing up or do you want me to do it? Okay, come on up. Thank you, Ms. Duncan.
Thank you.
Again, we just want to say how grateful we are to cross-sector partners because computer science is a living and breathing framework. It is going to take us being very intentional so that our response is not a year from now, that our response to teachers and the needs that they have to make sure that students have the most up-to-date computer science information is urgent. And in order to do that, we need a team of dedicated individuals whose expertise and background and passion for computer science is at the forefront to their commitment to North Carolina students. So thank you so much, and we're excited for next month to bring you the standards.
Thank you, Ms. Hemphill. One last thing, Mr. Chair, before I wrap up here. Sorry for being over time, but I think you can see everybody's kind of passionate about this topic. The team is very important, and Dr. Hemphill just mentioned it, but she's also kind of a one-lady show here at DPI doing this. We're trying to get this thing rolled out across the state. We're talking about reaching thousands of teachers and tens of thousands of students, and she's kind of running this alone, Mr. Superintendent as well. We need as much time and energy and attention poured into getting Dr. Hemphill the help that she needs within her group to make this happen as quickly as possible. So thank you for, again, as well as Ms. Duncan, thank you, Dr. Hemphill, for all your efforts on this. And it's a lot of work that's on your shoulders, and we really do need to get you some help. So thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. We'll now pause for up to 5 minutes to get our technology set for the next presentation. It's really good work. So I guess the standards will roll back through JB's. They normally, yeah. No, no problem. Thanks for leading this. Appreciate it. It's really good. Absolutely too. Me too. Very good. Yep.
So we have, remaining, hey.
Happy to be here.
Well, he was in the race.
I'm better every day.
He might have been close, I'm not sure, but he's moved back. So we have Lawson back, Craig Lawley back,
I've been really good.
and the rest of those are back. Well, he didn't have a race.
Oh, so some of them are not.
Some, yeah, it was rotating, yeah. So he didn't have a race. Brenda had a race, Linda. How you feel about last night? Still some kind of rough spots there, but some of them.
Yeah.
As long as we're very pleased with that. Dante Page, Henry Brewer from St. Louis. And William Jim.
That's awesome. I'm because you meet a guy one day. You know.
You don't want live stream, right?
I just need to go.
There you go. You can get around.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you. You're welcome.
I got Terry right here, so I have to sort of toggle between. Yeah. Just this is a little awkward.
All right, we are back in session, and we'll continue with our committee meetings, moving to the Student Learning and Achievement Committee, and I recognize the committee chair, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm joined at the SLA Committee by Dr. Olivia Oxendine. Mr. Chairman, we have a busy agenda today, and board members, and with your approval, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move one of our requested updates, which is the Ed Oversight Report on overall school performance grades, to the front of our agenda so we can accommodate Dr. Holliday, who is getting on a plane soon.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, board members, as you can see, I'm joined up here by the power of technology, not quite artificial intelligence, by Dr. Terry Holliday. A quick word of introduction, and then I'm going to recognize Dr. Holliday for some comments, and then board members for any questions and comments. We are working on this agenda item, the report to Joint Legislative Education Oversight that we submitted back on February 15th. This was a report in response to their request to take a look at school performance grades and to answer some questions about ways in which we would think about potential revisions. And this was from a study bill that was passed last session. Specifically questions about whether school performance grades should be done separately in growth and achievement, whether they should be a different weight than the current 80-20. We also asked for this study committee to look at whether we ought to look at multiple measures that would better reflect Leandro and our strategic plan, and to take a look at a couple other questions. We had a 21-member accountability working group that was supported by SREB, a state compact of 16 southern states, of which we are a member, and we have legislators who are members on their Legislative Advisory Committee, Board of Directors. And Dr. Terry Holliday was brought in to assist our accountability working group, which I should say included folks from across the state. We have our board advisors who are part of this, local board members. I think we had about 6 folks from the department. We had folks from the university and community college systems, from the governor's office, and some advocacy organizations who had been doing some work in this area. Dr. Holliday helped to lead the accountability working group through a series of examinations of opportunities in this area. This was important for us because Dr. Holliday, many of you know, was a superintendent in our own Transylvania County. in Iredell Statesville Schools, knows our state well, still resides up west of the Balsams in North Carolina, but also was the state commissioner in Kentucky and did some of his own revisions to the accountability system to address the goals and priorities in the state. And so we had an opportunity, not last time, to bring him in when we first looked at the report, but we did have a chance to get him in between flights around the country to come in and make some comments about this work for North Carolina and give you a chance to ask any questions of him about the contents of the report and about school performance grades and accountability in general. So at this time, I'd like to recognize Dr. Holliday for some comments and also appreciate, Dr. Holliday, your commitment to work with us on this important agenda.
Thank you. It's indeed a pleasure to talk to the state board, and I've really enjoyed the last few months working alongside your accountability commission and your state board staff to bring forward some thoughts on your accountability model driven by the request from the General Assembly. Since retiring in Kentucky in 2015, I've worked with about 40 states on different accountability measures. Primarily the last 2 or 3 years, we focused heavily on college and career readiness, and I'm currently working to support North Carolina. They have a team working on credentials, kind of linked up to my future NC goal. and it's funded by the Lumina Foundation. So a lot of work in North Carolina. It was my pleasure for about 8 months to support local superintendents. I served as the state superintendent's local superintendent liaison. I attended every regional superintendent roundtable, and one of the key topics during those 8 months was certainly the accountability model. So overall, kind of cut to the chase. North Carolina is probably due for some revisions to your accountability model because you're not quite getting the results that you desire. And the key to an accountability model is to set up a model that drives the behaviors of the people who can help you get the results you want for all children. The second thing that we noticed was you got a lot of disparate pathways going. You've got the General Assembly direction, you've got the state board goals, you've got the My Future NC goals, you've got your state Perkin. All of these things are a big jumble, as they are in most states. So the first key recommendation we made in the report was a perfect time, based on General Assembly request and the West End report, for you to consolidate visions. And I think the Leandro case had, when I came to Brevard, Transylvania, as superintendent, Leandro was the hot topic in '98. So interesting that it's still the hot topic in 2020. So how do you pull all those things together in a common vision with common indicators that drive the behavior of local superintendents, boards, principals, teachers, and students and parents? Well, our key recommendation for me, having looked at 40 plus states over the last few years, is those states who really are driving behaviors have more of a balanced scorecard approach. I would recommend that you look at page 7 in the report, where it asks you some key questions. I'll cut down to the bottom line. I would heavily recommend that you look at some type of K-3 index similar to Ohio, that you've got a lot of measures already in place. North Carolina's a leading state on third grade reading readiness, but your K-3 system is right now, you don't really have measures that show you a continuum of learning from K-3, and you're putting a lot of money into that program. So you may want to look at a K-3 index. The state board has established a clear goal of closing gaps. Leandro pushes that. So you have no measure related to closing achievement gaps. Over 30 states put in the ESTA model some type of closing achievement gaps index. And there are a lot of different ones out there. It'll take you a few months to figure out which ones you might want to drive toward. The other thing you've got to look at is the achievement and growth. We heavily recommend you report those separately, as most of your state is desired. I can tell you, you will never come upon a state that everybody will feel is adequate. So you've got to decide how to report all of this, and then look at different states, how they went. And we gave you a table that showed the weightings from all the other states. Graduation rate is a federal requirement, so continue doing that. The thing I have worked so hard the last 3 years is College Career Ready Index. North Carolina has all these measures in place. It would take very little effort for you to build a College Career Ready Index. And caution you in this one that while you may have multiple measures, ACT, SAT, AP, IB, all of these things, the students can show proficiency. You must really support credentials. Trey Michael and his team are working with us on establishing those credentials that lead to a living wage. So you don't want just a blanket workplace credentials. You want those credentials that lead to a living wage and have value to both the employer and students, and have post-secondary goals. And that's where my future NC could connect. So with accountability models, to wrap up here, you have two versions. You've got those measures that drive behaviors and you really count. And you build financial incentives, budgets toward those measures. Then you've got those measures that you report. These measures usually take a few years to get valid and reliable data, and where you want to look at opportunities. Your state board has opportunities gaps, but it's going to take you a while to build out which measures do we want to include in the big accountability. But you do want to report access to college credit courses, dual enrollment, credentials, AP, IB, those kind of things. You do want to report on teacher working conditions. You've been measuring that for years. You're the leading state in that work. And that ties right into the environment issues that you have in your state board plan. You want to work on school safety, discipline. Those issues were in your state board goals. And teacher quality. And as the chair of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, let me thank North Carolina and leading the way in being such a great state. And we're more than happy for you to report out your percentage of National Board teachers in the school district. So, drive behaviors by what means something in an aligned system, making sure that you put together the common goals and visions that reflect all the federal plans and your state stakeholders like General Assembly, state board plans, and then separate out what's going to count in the final report card, and we encourage a balanced scorecard, and then separate out what you're going to report on. So that represents the best working knowledge of the 50 plus states, and everybody's in the same position you guys are in. They're looking at, we're not getting the results we want, especially in third grade reading. So how do we modify our accountability models to get better results?
Dr. Holliday, thank you. I'm gonna move out of your view here to get to this microphone, so we keep that microphone on you and get some questions from board members. First, board members, just want to be clear. Again, the report that's on eBoard and that Dr. Holliday was talking about has gone to the legislature as essentially our opening conversation with them. That we think these represent important recommendations from a scan of what's happening in the country, but also from our accountability working group. There are a number of recommendations that are being offered, and essentially we've given it to the General Assembly as the conversation. We want to begin with them to look at how we might want to make some revisions to meet the goals that Dr. Holliday's talked about, but also that our own accountability working group raised as important. So at this time, let me get some questions for Dr. Holliday, or any comments, observations about his comments or the report itself.
I
All right.
have one quick
Mr.
question,
Duncan.
and it's about the report, and it's about the retest scores, although I'm having trouble finding the page where that came up. I think the question from the field had been, if you have a retest and the student, which in North Carolina, the way it's set up, is going to happen within 10 days of the time when the first test was taken, in which case I think the research is indicated showing you're not likely to have had enough time for further instruction to actually change the dynamic of what the score would be. But it can account for example, when a child didn't feel well, took the test one day, and then came back and felt, was not in poor health the next day and did pass. So there's some margin of passing, and the child gets credit for that. The district does not, in terms of the way the scores are done. And there's been some question raised about, should the districts get credit if the child passes on retest when they didn't pass the original test, when there's not enough time in between. I know this is a minor issue, so I read the report as saying it didn't necessarily think that was a good idea, but when I read the logic of it, I'm not sure it was necessarily addressing the question that had been raised out in the field. So I want to make sure there's not a disconnect.
Dr. Howard, I'm not sure how much you were involved in that discussion, but any comments from you would be welcome.
As I focused on the retest issue, and well, the big thing about retest, when I was a local superintendent in Transylvania County, we were the first district to require end of course tests for a high school diploma, and later on the whole state went in that direction. What we found is if a student was very close to passing the end of course, a retest would work with a short duration of remediation, but they had to be within a question or two. If they were, 5, 6 or more questions, the quick remediation doesn't work. All the research now is showing that you need intensive cycle during summer, 5, 6 weeks. When you get into that type of time period, you're not going to be able for your reporting staff, your assessment division, to get the numbers you need in time to get your school report cards out on time. So what we were looking at and making the recommendation is we felt like if you included the retest and really pushed more toward that, you might lead to unintended consequences of very poor remediation. And folks who might, I was a high school principal, so I knew how to game the system sometimes. So you need to avoid unintended consequences as much as possible. Now, if it counts for a district, unless you're going to do a district report card, what's it matter? And in Kentucky, we did do district report cards, but your local superintendents are not real keen on having a local report card for it's just like the school report cards. So a lot of unintended consequence things to think about when retesting.
Well, just to give a little feedback follow-up, if I could, I don't think the local district leaders disagree with your assessment that it would take a longer period of time to bring about a true remediation. I don't think their point. I think their point is if there's a retest when you don't have that longer time, then in fact the child has shown the proficiency required. And from their standpoint, there may not be a district report card, but there is essentially to their citizens a district report card because there's a proficiency report on what students met the proficiency levels or not, and there's a percentage handed out on that. For the students, it counts. They reach proficiency and move on. For the district, it doesn't, and I think the district leaders feel like it should count for the district exactly. And so I think that's the point. I don't really think we disagree at all on anything that you've said in terms of what I'm hearing from the superintendents. The question is, and again, this is a minor question, it's taking up more than enough time, but I'll stop with that. The question is, shouldn't that count for the district if there's a number of children who do pass it and taken the retest a few days later?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Duncan. And we have input from this one study, but it may be an issue we want to bring back and have a more definitive decision on with the department.
Well, and I think the study reinforces the request in some ways as opposed to being inconsistent with it. So that's the thought.
All right. Seeing no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Holliday get ready for his flight. Dr. Holliday, appreciate your being with us, appreciate the opportunity we had to engage you in this and the work you're doing around the country, and glad that we're a part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
All right. Take care. Thank you. I did not take your credit card out of the back. All right. All right. We're going to go back up to the top of the agenda. Board members, we have 3 action on first read, 3 action, and 1 discussion item and 1 remaining update item. We're going to start with SLA 1, our 2020 invitation to submit textbooks for evaluation and adoption for grade 9 through 12 math and career and technical education. I believe Dr. Fair is coming up. Am I right about that? All right. And Dr. Fair is going to talk us through the process. This will be an action on first read. We'll vote on tomorrow.
Good morning, Chairman Davis,
Superintendent Johnson and members of the board. On behalf of the Digital Teaching and Learning Division, I want to present to you information about the 2020 invitation to submit textbooks for evaluation and adoption for our state. So the general information about the process itself is that we have an invitation, which is the information that goes out for the publishers, the guidelines, the parameters that they would need to know to be able to submit their materials in our state adoption process. That information allows them to submit bids, and once the bids are submitted, we have an extensive evaluation process that involves 23 textbook commissioners, and then those commissioners select teachers in the content areas, in this case in 9-12 mathematics and CTE courses, to come and be a part of the evaluation process, specifically checking for alignment to content standards and then also to quality criteria. At the end of the process, the textbook commission makes a recommended list, and they present that list in addition to some reports to you all for your review and approval and adoption for the titles. At the end, all of this leads to a list of high quality materials that are available at the lowest possible price in the nation for schools and districts to be able to place orders from. There are many general statutes and state board policies that guide the textbook adoption process. So for many of you that have been on the board, this is a review of some of those general statutes and just a highlight of some of the policies that provide the guidance for this work. One of the most important pieces is the actual definition of textbooks. Many people hear the word and they automatically think print materials, and that's where they focus, is that, oh my goodness, you all are just looking at books, you're just reviewing all these books in a room. But the actuality of it is that the statute allows for the materials to be print or non-print, to include those types of programs that would require the use of electronic equipment. So to put it in a short term, we do get digital submissions with our submissions from publishers. We do get digital submissions. We have general statutes that provide for the guidance for the state board to adopt titles, basically making sure that they're aligned and that they're comprehensive and aligned to the standard courses of study for whichever content areas are under adoption for that cycle. And then also we have your state board policies, as well as information in the invitation that outlines rules for the process. So heavily guided by general statute and state board policy, and a lot of that information appears in our invitation document so that publishers and the public are aware of them as well. I've mentioned earlier that we have a textbook commission. The work could not be done without the textbook commission. This is a member of 23 people who are parents, principals, teachers, and at least one superintendent. So they come to the commission knowing what the work is for the commission in terms of looking for quality materials, what types of materials they need, and the way that they get on the board, or the member, the commission, is that they're recommended by the state superintendent's office to the governor's office, and then the governor would appoint them. So they serve a 4-year appointment. Our current commission is in place until April of 2021. So many of them have been on the commission before. They understand the work. They know the value of looking for resources that are aligned not only to the state standards, but to the quality criteria that's developed in our invitation. The commissioners evaluate the materials. Although they utilize teachers as evaluation advisors, they are responsible for the final reports that come to you and the recommended list that comes to you, and the commission leadership brings that information to you at some point after we're finished with the process. In this past year, they brought it to your November meeting, a list of recommended titles. It was for K-12 ELA, and they would do the same in this process. At the end, bring a list of recommended titles for your approval. This is just a general outline or high-level overview of the schedule. This is also in the invitation document that you received in your materials, but this just shows you the pace of the process, that the commission has already begun meeting, and they will also at some point meet again with curriculum specialists here from the agency to find out more details about the quality criteria that's in the invitation, as well as information about the content area standards. All of the commissioners are not qualified in each of the areas that we adopt, so that is why they work with teachers that are qualified in all of those areas, and those teachers provide advisement to the commissioners. So you'll see in this schedule that they do have several meetings before they actually do the evaluation, and that is so that they can get the information that they need about standards as well as the quality that they're looking for in the materials. Also in the calendar, you can see that we'll have the submission of our seal bids. That should be coming in April, should you approve the invitation. And then from there, we would do the evaluation in July. We usually try to do the evaluation when teachers are out of school because the process so heavily depends on the teacher's evaluation against the standards. I mentioned before the criteria. In the invitation document in your materials, that criteria is within those pages. And you can see the different areas. There's content, there's pedagogy, accessibility, technology. So there's various areas and components that the consultants have made sure that are covered so that we can make sure that we're getting resources that meet the needs of our teachers and students. Again, this is in the invitation, and the advisors are trained on the criteria that's in the invitation. We do have an NC Publishers Registry as noted in State Board policy. And publishers that are on that registry receive the invitation through an email, and they are also have to be on the registry in order to participate in our adoption process. Also, we do remind publishers that they are not allowed to put undue pressure on any members of the board, any members of the commission, any of our teacher advisors, or any staff here at DPI. All right, and by undue pressure, of course, that means any pressure on teachers and commissioners to select their specific books, as well as any type of contact that's personal. We do allow for the publishers to make written communication if they need clarification about the adoption process, and they also put in writing if they want to be reconsidered if they have materials that are not recommended initially during the deliberations meeting. All right, so this just is more of the same, no personal contact, and that would be from the time you all as a board approve the invitation through the time you get ready to adopt the actual list. Reminding you of the standards of conduct, we also share this with our textbook commissioners and also with our teachers. Eric Snyder usually comes and does the presentation. He just presented last week to our textbook commissioners, and he will also come and present to the teachers who are evaluating the standards, by the standards, and remind them of the rules of conduct. So avoiding conflict is one of the main things that they talk about. The reason why we bring this as action on first read is because it allows time for the publishers to begin to prepare for submissions so that they are making sure that they have reviewed our North Carolina standards, they have reviewed our quality criteria, and that they're bringing to us high quality materials that we can have for our students in our schools. It also allows time for the commission members to select teachers. They will begin that process shortly after you approve the invitation. They would begin the process of recruiting teachers in the content areas that are under adoption, and then try to put those teachers in place for July. It also provides the opportunity for the materials to be available at the beginning of the next school year. We'll go through the process, it'll finish up by the end of this year, and we'll have contracts in place by January, but schools will begin actually doing their ordering next school year. And I think that's it. All right, so do you all have any questions or comments for me on the 2020 invitation or the textbook adoption process?
I have a question.
Dr. Oxendon.
Thank you very much. I may have heard this in the past and have forgotten it, so a reminder would be very helpful. Let's say, once a school, we approve the process, and the commission adopts, makes recommendations on textbooks. School systems go forward and they order textbooks for a given period of time. So is that adoption period maybe 5 years, 7 years?
Yes, the adoption period is for 5 years. When we do the contracts with the publishers, it's typically a 5-year contract. So those materials would remain on the adopted list for that price for 5 years.
So during that period of time, do publishing companies ever come back and with an update to a textbook? I'm thinking mainly of, let's say, in the area of the sciences.
Yes, and in each content area, they have the ability to do that if there are changes to their materials, and we call that the substitution process. And there's information about that in the contract as well as in the invitation. But they would have to formally send a notification that they are requesting a substitution for their materials, and then they provide information about what has changed, and they have to provide the old materials along with the new materials, and then staff from our agency actually review the materials because they still want to be sure these materials are in line with the content area standards as well as the quality, and it does not impede the learning process that is based on the standards at hand. So yes.
Does that happen often?
It doesn't happen very often. It happens every once in a while, but not very often. The most recent request that we got was actually from a company that had done some Microsoft Office materials, and they have updated, of course, the version of Office, and so they had requested substitution for that very reason because they don't even produce the old materials anymore. So that did come into play last year, I think it was, but. It only happens whenever they have updated their edition, possibly, or updated any materials significantly in their materials.
All right, thank you.
Joel.
Those revisions, is that additional costs, or that goes into the original cost?
No, that goes into the original cost. Once they have the materials on the list and they've provided us with the lowest cost, the only thing that could happen with that cost is that it could go down. If they lower that price, then they are to contact us and let us know that the price has been lowered, and then our list would be updated with the lower price. But it would not be an increase in the cost, no.
So during that 5-year period of time, I've heard complaints about, well, we're stuck for 5 years with this. And there's nowhere, there's nowhere getting around what you said. There is. I mean, who makes that decision? The publisher, or do we call the publisher and say, hey, wait a minute?
No, typically they will contact us and let us know that that their materials have changed and that they need to ask for a substitution because they are producing the newer edition and would like to get it on our list so that that's what schools are ordering. So it's typically that they initiate that.
And that's the
Right, it's not very often. It's every once in a while. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right.
Just one final
One follow-up.
point to that, because I suppose my concern is the changes that a company would make, revisions and updates. I would hope that those kind of changes would not interfere with the status of standards.
Right. Yeah, that if they do make changes, that's why they have to submit whatever the new changes and the new materials are along with the old. And staff do compare them to be sure, and they do compare them against what was looked for at the onset of the process, because those would be the standards that were used when they reviewed the original materials.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board members, we will vote on this action on first reading tomorrow to launch this 2020 invitation. Dr. Fair, thank you very much.
Thank you.
SLA 2 is a report to the General Assembly. This is on our progress on the implementation of the College and Career Ready Graduate Program. As you may remember, we've been working diligently for a number of years in the community college system to put these courses into place and into the field. We have a first phase of implementation happening right now in the spring of 2020, and we'll have statewide implementation in the fall. We are just approving a report to be submitted, but thought this was a good time to get a little bit of an update on where this stands, so board members have an understanding of how this is phasing in. You've got two documents, the report and also frequently asked questions. Dr. Molinix is going to give us a little bit of update, kind of a brief update on this, and then we'll get to your questions.
Sure. Good morning, Chairman Davis, Superintendent Johnson, and members of the board. On behalf of the CCRG team, which is Dr. David Stegall, Christy Lynch-Ebert, Sneha Shaw-Coltrane, and myself, I'm going to provide a little bit of an update on the report to the North Carolina General Assembly progress on the implementation of Career and College Ready Graduates Program. A few updates. I am happy to report that we are in the procurement process for this. It is now moving along expeditiously, and we anticipate that it will be finalized in the very near future so that we can have funding in place for Ed Ready, which is the NROC platform that will provide this remedial coursework to our high school students. Also, we are working with the community college system to ensure that once that procurement process is complete, professional development is provided to the teachers across the state. We are looking at doing that virtually so that we can make sure that we hit all of the teachers and provide adequate training. We are also looking at some face-to-face. We did face-to-face trainings back in the fall, but without access to the platform, that training was a little bit limited to more of a demo than it was actually a hands-on training. This report is a unique report because it is a collaborative report between the State Board of Education, DPI, and the community college system. The community college system has had this report approved by their board, and so the next phase is for us to have this approved so that it can go forward to the General Assembly.
Board members, questions about what's in the report or about the continued rollout of the work?
Mr. Duncan?
I'm sorry, Mr. Duncan. I thought you were raising your hand.
It's just a quick question, and it's in anticipation, not something I would expect in the report right now. I think when this went through, there was some discussion about there would be an ongoing evaluation of what the right cut scores were with respect to AC test scores, et cetera. Now the test scores being used. What would be I know it would be premature to be doing that right now. What would be the proposed timing of when that reevaluation would be done or reassessment would be done?
So we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Christy and Dr. Stigall. So we have in the report the updated, and also with the FAQ, the updated requirements for that. And Christy, can you provide? Yeah. And so.
And
for
perhaps
us to-
restated, I thought there was going to be, once we saw a year of results, that we would have some further negotiation with the community college system, depending on what we were seeing and if that was necessary.
In the community college system, they did set the cut scores, and they will do an evaluation of how many students were caught, in that catchment area, how many were served, and the results from that. So we anticipate this time next year for a study to be done by the community college system. We'll partner in any way we can to get the results from our high schools. So we should this time next year have some further data, the success stories, and potential changes in the scores if need be.
And is it anticipated we would be part of that discussion? That is, it would not just be the community colleges determining, but there would be truly a dialogue and a collaborative effort.
That is our hope, and that's the dialogue that we're having with them as well.
Very good. So we should look about a year from now for
Yes, sir.
that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Other questions? Okay, board members, remember this is one of our legislative requests. It's about $540,000 or $60,000 for
For this year, it is $470,000, and then going forward, so in the previous budget, it was requested there would be a position that would also be funded, and because that request was not funded, we are only this year requesting the $470,000 for the platform, which provides the membership to the students across the state. Going forward, next year, we would request again that position would be funded so that we could have somebody that is actually dedicated to doing the work between DPI and the community colleges and make sure that we're providing that support for the teachers as they need it.
Thank you, Dr. Molnix. So just a reminder of the importance of this $470,000 request, not being completely clear what the budget situation is going to be like. We're going to have to figure out a way to make sure we have this in place. So we're looking at Mr. McKinney over here as he sits in his new seat for his work with the General Assembly. Dr. Molnix, thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, SLA 3 was with us a few months ago and is now coming back. Action on first read, appointments for the Governor's School Board of Governors. You have 3 resumes in the attachments. One is for Dr. Eric Bracey, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools. He's been filling the local superintendent representative slot and has agreed to a reappointment, which is allowed. And then you have 2 resumes for the Region 7. One is Ms. Rhonda Waugh, and the second, Ms. Deborah Goldberg. Ms. Waugh comes to us as a recommendation of State Superintendent Johnson. Ms. Goldberg comes to us as a recommendation from the Board of Governors of the Governor's School Chairman Lee Connor. And so today I'd like any questions about those nominees. Tomorrow we vote. So you have the resumes on eBoard. Are there any questions about any of these nominees?
Mr. Buxton, if I may.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even see you up there, Ms.
It's all
Thomas.
right.
My apologies.
Just a point of clarification, it's
Yep.
Region 6 or
Oh, I'm
Southwest,
sorry,
not
sorry, I
Region
said
7.
Region 6. Thank you. Ms. Thomas, anything else you would say? I'm sorry, I was
No,
pointed the
that's
other
fine.
direction.
I have nothing else to add. We just love to have these appointments filled.
Okay, hearing none, I suggest looking at the resumes a little further, and we will
JB.
back to that tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Duncan. I'm not doing very well at recognizing people this morning.
It's all right.
Mr. Duncan.
I'm sorry I raised my hand as much. Because I saw with respect to the recommendation from the governor's school, some information as to why that recommendation was being made. I think it would be helpful to hear from staff. There's obviously another recommendation that made to get some additional information on the background of that recommendation. I think would be helpful to me to appropriately consider the applications, and thankful to people who are willing to serve.
Okay. Superintendent,
Yeah,
you want to speak to that?
As I've told you all by email, the state board policy that's been followed for years is superintendent, with the help of staff at DPI, go out and find a great nominee for this board. We then bring it for approval by the State Board of Education. That's the way every other candidate has ever been approved for this board. I guess one question is why we're changing that policy at the last minute and getting another resume. I would imagine by the policy that the ultimate decision is yours, but it would be very unfortunate if DPI staff has gone through all the process to work with partners in that region, find someone who's very excited about this, who knows about the opportunity, who expects to be appointed because we followed the process you set forth, just at the last minute change the process and have someone else appointed. But I would imagine at the end of the day, it's the state board's decision.
That's all right. So board members, I think the state superintendent's correct on both fronts here, that it is his duty, or her, if there's another person is sitting in that seat, to recommend, and it's the board's at the end of the day to maintain and appoint the Board of Governors. So we do have recommendations in front of us. Let me ask for entertain one more round. Any questions about the individuals themselves? Yep.
Well, first of all, thank you for that background in terms of the background, but in addition to those thoughts, are there some things in particular that brought the staff's recommendation that would be helpful to hear about this candidate?
Yes, she's a lifelong teacher, and she's very excited about this opportunity.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. That will be, those are our three action on first reads. That will be before us tomorrow for approval. We've got three actions. We have looked at these before. There's a little bit of new information in two of them. SLA 4 is our kindergarten entry assessment and policy amendments. You remember last time, in fact, we've actually looked at this a couple of times. Once was an update as part of our K-3 literacy update, and then last month it was before us for discussion. I do not remember any questions at that time, but let me entertain any questions at this time. You have the material with you. Okay, seeing none, we'll have that item for action, SLA 4, tomorrow. SLA 5 is our Ed Oversight Report on Read to Achieve. We have, that report came to you last month. There was some additional data that came relative to summer reading camp teaching personnel and licenses, and we wanted to make sure you had a chance to hear some of the revised data but know that, again, we're just approving this report. So brief presentation, and then we'll take any questions. Dr. Galloway.
Good morning or afternoon, I'm not even sure what time it is yet. So you have an additional page to this report that I went over last month with you. The summary shows the summer reading camp teacher information. And so it will break down the experience, the license, and the bonus information about the teachers who taught summer reading camp. So we saw the average years of experience for the teachers who taught reading camp to be 13 and a half years. The number of teachers that had 10 or more years of experience, which I think is a really good sign of whether they have enough experience in reading in particular. We had 58% of our teachers who were teaching reading camp who did have 10 or more years of experience. As far as the license breakdown, we looked at areas that were related to reading, teaching reading. So it breaks down into a reading license, a K-6 license, or BK, or EC and EL. So all of those would be considered related and pertinent to be able to teach reading. So we broke it down, and 91% of the teachers who teach reading camp have one of those licensure areas. As far as the bonuses, we had 9% of the teachers from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade who got the bonus, and then 13% of the total that were qualified taught summer reading camp. So that's looking at it from an inside view and then an outside view of the teachers who got the reading camp bonuses. So in looking over that, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take those questions now, or any other questions about the remainder of the report.
Dr. Galloway, thank you. Board members, questions about the report or the addendum presented today? Seeing none, Dr. Galloway, thanks to you and your team for the work you've been doing to assess plans for reading camps and give districts an opportunity to get some feedback on where they could strengthen those. I think pretty clear to me from the report, we have some good experience in our reading camps. We may not have the best approach and some of the highest quality instructional approach that we're able to provide some feedback on. So I think this is good movement and momentum.
Yeah. And the districts have been very receptive. They're already sending in their plans, and we're preparing to give them feedback. So
Right.
Good things
Thank
are
you.
happening.
All right. We have one more action item for tomorrow, also Read to Achieve related. Dr. Stegall is coming up, let me reset. Last month, we had talked about the need to have some guidance from the board and the department on eligibility for summer reading camps, first graders, second graders, third graders. As you know, we've been in a transition year from M-Class to iStation, new systems. They have different ways and different tiers, and the department's been working to standardize as much as possible this transition, so it feels like the kind of priorities we've done in the past. That has not been an easy process because of some of the differences in the systems, and also recognizing that we don't quite yet know what our future looks like on the reading diagnostic. And so the department is coming with some recommended guidance that they'd like to have us approve. And Dr. Stegall, recognize you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, Superintendent Johnson, board members, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm here actually to present the Read to Achieve Reading Camp Cut Score recommendations. This has been a long process, as was just shared, trying to provide the best support possible for school districts and teachers for those students that may need extra support. We're focused on the district support portion of the reading camps, and currently the data is showing that an increase of students who will qualify with priority enrollment in reading camps this school year, especially in first and second grade. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. iStation levels versus tiers allow for, as you see from the chart, for the diagram, allow for more granularity in the data. And since this is the first year for students, statewide implementation of iStation assessments, there is still limited data in first and second grade, and we want to make sure we're analyzing that as best as possible. There's some great news to look at. iStation levels, as you see here. In the past, we've had red, yellow, and green, 3 levels. iStation, we have 5 levels, far below proficient, approaching proficient, proficient, and above proficient, as you see how those fall out. They offer the opportunity, again, to more specialized granularity in the data in the relation of the level of risk for students, and it offers the ability to focus on the highest priority students. The red and yellow include students that are well below and slightly below. The light green students are students who are close to being proficient, have just a few small gaps in some certain areas that could use some support and could benefit from additional support, but are approaching that proficient level that we would like. This data has helped, hopefully, teachers as they look at instructional level grouping. They help them understand the level of intensity of instruction around the 5 components to reach the end of the year expectation. It's been used to inform instruction in the classroom, small groups, and specialized support. And it also is used for, as I mentioned, real time throughout the year for those support needs that are very fluid as the students show growth throughout each update. What I have here is 2 charts. One is showing the 5 levels of I-Station for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and also the corresponding Lexile levels that go along with each of those 5 levels. These levels inform teachers where the students are at mid-year and end of the year. You see the chart on the left is middle of the year, the chart on the right is end of the year. To keep policy decisions consistent with the past, the priority enrollment for summer camp is what that we're going to recommend for 2020 are for those students in 1st and 2nd grade whose ISEP overall score or the score on the reading comprehension test is level 1 or 2, the red and the yellow. Those students are our priority students who need the most support, who still have gaps and potential growth areas in their reading score. And just in case you're wondering, the ISIP stands for I-Station Indicator of Proficiency on Early Reading. So those teachers, as they're analyzing this, they can, if I'm a 1st grade teacher, I can look where their ISIP score falls. Is it within the range of proficient? If not, we also have the Lexile level score that they can use as well. Is the student showing proficiency based on the Lexile level? It gives a multi-tier approach to looking at student accomplishment, student growth, student need, their proficiency. The guidelines, as we shared here, we propose to provide guidance to districts and charters where making decisions for priority enrollment in reading camp. And at the top of this, you see priority enrollment levels 1 and 2. It's essentially taking the charts you saw on the previous page and taking our 1st graders, the middle of the year on the left, and as they go across the end of the year. So right now they're notifying parents, your student at this point in time is showing that they may need additional support in reading camps this summer. We'll send a finalized version of that with the end of the year data to see if the students have changed, if they've come out of that need for supportive structure in summer camps or not. We have 1st and 2nd grade at the top, and as you see, 3rd grade is aligned through a metametric study. The Lexile levels are aligned to the ISIP score from I-Station, and 3rd graders who do not meet any of the following pathways would need to come to summer camp. There's lots of ways for 3rd graders to test out of that or not necessarily be required. Obviously, the beginning of the year assessment, state board approved alternative assessments, Read to Achieve reading portfolio, Read to Achieve assessment, good cause exemption, the EOG or the EOG retest, and then again this ISIP ER score. So 3rd grade, we have lots of measures along the way, starting at the beginning of the year throughout for students to show proficiency level. The bottom of the chart, as you see, is students who are in that lime green, that middle area, who aren't necessarily priority enrollment, but could benefit possibly from summer camp. We want to make sure that they are also, the parents know that they are also eligible for enrollment in summer camp as the needs arise. The new table shows, again, the priority enrollment versus the students who are also eligible. LEAs can avail themselves to serve the level 3 students as they have the ability to provide that support. And at the conclusion of this year, we're going to have more data, statewide data, to analyze the connection and how well this aligns with student achievement in 3rd grade and beyond, and to continue to inform us on where those levels need to be. But we feel these scores are the best area for us to provide the most support to the students who need it in reading camps this summer. Again, the level 1 and 2s will be our priority students. The level 3 would also be eligible for reading camps this summer. The parents have that authority to ask for their child to be in there, and the districts. We have some districts who have capacity to serve those free of charge, and we hope that will help provide the support the student needs for growth going into the next school year. A couple final points. Our focus is on providing real-time support for teachers. We want students to have quality instruction, throughout the year, not just focused on an assessment score. These assessments are our ways to stop and do a check-in. Are what we're doing, are the strategies we're using making a difference for students on their achievement levels? We want to make sure we provide these interventions early and as needed, and build educator capacity. Our focus is multifaceted. We want to make sure we're building the capacity of teachers, providing the support, and providing materials for them to reach those students. I'll be glad to pause to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Gall, thank you. Let me get any questions, board members, advisors. Dr. Oxendine.
Just a quick question, and this thought just entered my brain a minute ago when you were talking about those students who are not the first line priority, but if there's room or reason, then a district or a principal could say yes to those students. My question though is, at that point, let's say X number of students are accepted, they're not high priority, but they find a way into the system. They are treated, I would assume, instructionally, they would be treated as a priority case rather than the students who are really just need the intense instruction.
Right.
Unless the teacher and the principal and the district has some way of personalizing instruction to make sure that the highest priority kids are getting that really intense instruction.
And if you have had a chance to see summer camps or know much, the teachers do a great deal of differentiating within the summer camps, so there's high intensity, because even within the camps, the students don't all have the same gaps. So the instruction may be around certain areas of the reading instruction, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. And so there is a tiered level of support and a varied level of support, and they move in and out of those groups based on where their need arises. So yes, they would be able to differentiate for those students. Even if they're not the high priority students, those are the biggest gaps, they still will differentiate for those students on the need they have.
Because that is where differentiation gets to be important in those summer reading camps.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Mr. Duncan.
Looking at the table 1 on the proficiency levels, if I heard right, and please correct me if I'm missing this, it's 210 is the score, the cut score being used for first grade that would be required to go, and 219 would be the, if you can accommodate, you want to be able to accommodate those students as part of it. Is that right?
So 210 is the summer, so yes, middle of the year, middle of the year, 210. And then by the end of the year, 218 or below. So it's the same threshold, it's just the students to be further along, but you would expect a mid-year first grader to be above a 210 to be considered that approaching proficiency level.
Yes.
By end of the year, you would expect them to be at the 218. So yes, it's the same, it's that moving spectrum where they should be on the spectrum as they move along. Checking in at the middle of the year, 210, if they've not made progress, if they're not to that level, we give parents a heads up that they may be needing some support in the summer.
If we look at the second grade, then, if I heard it right, the scores were 226 would be the required mid-year, and then 237 at the end of the year. Is that right?
226, yes, sir, and 231.
All right, then I didn't hear it right. So I thought there was 237 on one of those slides, so I misheard. So
That's the consider eligibility.
right.
You got it right.
So considered eligibility goes up to 237, but it only goes up to 218 for first grade. I guess what I'm getting at is in second grade, it looks like it goes up to the midpoint of approaching proficiency, but after first grade, it only goes up to below proficient. And that's a long-winded way to get to the question, why are we making that distinction?
Dr. Galloway, do you want to speak to that?
Dr. Galloway comes up, but just one thing I will remind board members. One is, these are the folks who are eligible to attend. Under law, we can't require anyone
Right.
to attend. So they're not required in
Right.
terms of the required language. And then second, you may remember under M class, it was red, yellow, green. Now we've got under I-Station, red, yellow, I don't know my colors that well, pale green, a little more green, and a little more green than that. So this is a red and yellow that corresponds with the M class red, just as a way to visualize it.
Right, so essentially what we're doing is we're keeping the decision for policy aligned with what it has been in the past. So in the past with the tiers and the red and yellow, that was the students who were identified for priority enrollment. So the same is happening here on these charts, we're looking at the red and yellow as the highest top priority students who would be considered for priority enrollment. So the numbers on the chart on a few slides over, they align with those numbers of the red and yellow for middle of year here and then end of year here. So if you look at each of those endpoints, that would be the end of what's considered the level 2, which is the yellow. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is really strictly for policy, so all of the instructional recommendations still stay in place. So we're looking at that word proficiency, and we're establishing that with data this year with iStation. And so really we're gonna look at changing those words at the top of that table because those were aligned with 3rd grade proficiency. And we filtered it down to 1st and 2nd. And so we're trying to keep policy aligned now to make sure that we are in line with what has been expected. We're not dropping the bar, we're not raising the bar, we're keeping it consistent with policy decisions. We are offered the opportunity to look at the granularity and data for instructional recommendations. So that is a huge bonus. And that is where the bottom of that table comes into play for districts to look at those students. Please make sure that you're not missing those students because that's the kids that really can focus on those important skills that you were talking about, Dr. Oxendine, in the summer reading camp that they may be missing along the way, and we have data to suggest that.
Ms. Morris and then Ms. Webb.
Do we know statewide how the number of students who are qualifying now based on MOI scores compare to years prior?
If we look at the students who are in level 1 and 2, it's very consistent with what it has been in the past. When we add that 30% of students who are those in that lime green,
Right.
it has almost doubled,
And I think-
which statistically it makes sense.
I think some of what you've probably heard is the 70% threshold. That term has been used, and that's aligned to the 3rd grade only.
Right.
3rd grade only, and that's with the Lexile level. So, if you would transfer that to 1st and 2nd grade, which we don't have data to support necessarily, just applying that directly on, then there were a larger number that could have been caught into that needing the summer camp support. But as we've recommended here with the red and yellow, it would be similar to years past. The additional support for the students that are in the level 3, they could have more students, but that would be, the students are eligible but not the high priority students. They would have, the districts could to provide support to those students if parents were willing and wanting to send those students.
Follow up?
I'm okay.
Good. Ms. White?
A couple of months ago, we were asked to prioritize a whole list of items for funding. And one of the items on that list was funding for summer learning camps. It gives me great pause to not have priority seating for those kids. We'll go back to the colors because the approaching proficiency. What I know is a child that is approaching proficiency in May goes home with no additional support and comes back and the summer learning loss has occurred, and then that classroom teacher is faced with an opportunity to bring that student back up to where they should be for the next year. So I'm going to reemphasize my request for funding for summer learning camps. I would extend it beyond to include all of those children, because as we know, the gap only gets wider as the child progresses to the next grade. We can fix it early or we can fix it later. And what does it look like when we're fixing it later? It's our restart funding.
Looks like
Because
CCRG.
okay, so anyway, soapbox.
So I do think it's important that you do have those for 3rd grade. So you are all the way up through approaching proficiency. And one of the challenges, if I'm hearing this correctly, so I'm going to paraphrase, is that the data we have for 1st and 2nd grade under iStation is basically extrapolations of that aren't as detailed or precise as we'd like. And so what we've done is essentially take those same kids as we had before in the priority state. Now, we actually have lots of money for reading camps that don't get used. So we've got under 50% attendance at these things. So if districts want to bring more kids in approaching proficiency, there's some room if they think that's the best strategy for them. Ms. Morris?
To second Ms. White's point, I was the director of our summer reading camp for 3 elementary schools in Moore County, and what I saw through my time in that role is it's those students that are approaching proficiency that we have the most impact on, because it's a short 3.5-week, half-day program. And so those are the students that we're able to cross over into proficient, and that label, building positive self-identity for those students to feel like I am now proficient, that social emotional aspect of going into 2nd or 3rd grade being labeled as proficient is a big part of their reading approach and growth. If we have extra money, this is a second point, it was very, very, very difficult to not offer our students lunch. We had very little money for snacks, and we had students riding on the school bus for an hour each way because of transportation. And so if you take a half day and they're getting on the bus at 6 a.m. and they're getting home at 1:30, 2 p.m., we are offering no lunch, and the snacks are very minimal. So we had hungry children. So if we're not utilizing our funds, I would like to make that a priority.
And you can do that, and in some areas like where I was, we had universal summer lunch, so everyone got free lunch throughout the summer. So, and to both your points, those students that you're speaking of they're eligible for summer camp. The parents can say, my child's coming, no cost, they are eligible. So it's not about exclusion at all. We want to make sure that students that need the support get the most support. What we don't want is, and again, I'm speaking just in hypotheticals, what we don't want is districts only focusing on students that may be able to make that leap to proficiency in the summer, and not focusing on those high priority students who are well behind. So there could be the danger of saying they focus only on those level 2s and 3s that are close and try to get them over the finish line, and it just further widens the gap to those students who are far behind. So we want to make sure those high priority students who have the largest gaps, that we don't lose track, that they need the most intensive support. So these are both points well taken.
All right. I'm going to do one more. Dr. Oxenine.
15 seconds, you can
Please.
time me. Okay, here
All right,
we go.
go.
So all of these points are great, but they're academic unless parents say, I want my child in summer camp. So we've got to find a way to say, yes, I want my child in summer camp.
All right.
I did it. 15 seconds.
And that's what my team is working very hard on doing as well, is giving recommendations to the districts to help foster that. We want that momentum to go, and we want the parents to say, yes, this is something I want my student to go to. So helping the districts to create that and providing those spotlights on the people who are doing that.
Yeah, well, Dr. Scull, thank you very much. Board members, this will be an action item tomorrow to approve the guidance that we just heard detailed. We have one discussion item, SLA 7, our CTE and Career Pathways new federal plan. I'd remind you that we've been talking about this for the better part of a year as we went into our transition year last year and had some updates on what the components of the new Perkins 5 legislation or the reauthorization, and our state plan. Dr. Michaels and team have been coming and giving us pieces of this through the year. This submission is now due, I believe, in April to the Federal Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. And so we have this as a discussion this month and then action next month so the plan can be submitted. As you've read through it, I hope you're as excited about some of the new directions on pathways and direct connections to post-secondary in the workforce as I know our department is. And Dr. Michaels, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Johnson, board members and advisors, particularly our student advisor, who will benefit the most from our new state plan. I do hope that all of you have had a chance to read our state plan in depth. That's a little bit of a joke. I know it's a very long plan. Some of you have asked questions about the format of the plan. The plan is a little different kind of a read. It's not a narrative like we're used to. We were actually trained yesterday on how we will submit the final state plan. And there's actually a bunch of text boxes that we take data from and drop it in, and then different people at the federal government review different pieces. So it's a little wonky from a perspective of what a plan should really look like typically. We're excited to present to you today our final state plan for the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, also known as Perkins 5. This plan will outline how North Carolina partners with other state agencies, business and industry partners, post-secondary institutions, and others to provide the absolute best quality education for students to ensure they are prepared for the workforce demands of the future. Pending approval in April and by the Community College System State Board, the joint document will go to the governor's office for his signature, then to the federal government for review and approval. I'd like to recognize and introduce several of our staff that are here today. Kimberly McDonald, our Assistant Director, and Marty Toby, our Section Chief for Regional Services. Depending on the questions that we have today, we may call upon them to help us answer some of those and provide a little bit more detail if needed. I also want to highlight Dr. Bob Witchker. He did have to step away. He has a personal appointment. His wife is ill, and so please keep him in your thoughts and prayers. He and I have worked extensively to prepare this. A quick reminder, we do develop and submit this plan as a joint operation between us and our community college partners. Their board is also in the process of approving this before it goes to the governor for his signature. I wanted to give you a quick review of our timeline. As you can see, we are nearing the end of our project, which is great for students as we operationalize this work next year. April 15th, 2020 is our deadline to submit this, and we are positive that we will be able to make that deadline. All is moving forward. The next two slides will provide a review of what we've already discussed in April of last year and October of last year related to this plan. We will come back to the major topics in later slides to inform you of the final status of much of the work. Between November 2018 and December 2019, it seems like it's much longer than that, we had 34 input sessions with multiple stakeholder groups. These groups included academic and CTE teachers, faculty and administrators, career guidance and academic counselors, charter school staff, parents and students, community college leaders, many business and industry, workforce development, WIOA adult education, post-secondary programs, and NC community colleges continuing education, just to name a small subset of those groups. We had a very lengthy input and writing process, as I said, between November and December of last year. In April, we briefed you on our career pathways, our concentrator definition, the performance indicators, including the new program quality measure, our comprehensive local needs assessment, and then, of course, submitted the transition plan to the federal government in June of 2019. We'll come back to several of these items as we move throughout the slide deck. I do want to emphasize, while we're on this slide very quickly, the new requirement for a comprehensive local needs assessment. I emphasize local needs assessment. We've heard often times about comprehensive needs assessment. Perkins and the Strengthening CTE Act for the 21st century really place special emphasis on local needs assessment. From our perspective, this is one of the single most impactful items in the legislation, possibly ever, with regards to some of the historical context of Perkins. It requires our local district to use data and to work with local business and industry partners to determine the needs of the local workforce, which we find is very valuable locally. That information is then used to plan for programmatic offerings so that students are thinking about and able to get into the talent pipeline to those employers as early as middle school. We will revisit this document in a few minutes, and we're very fortunate today that the architect of that document, Mr. Marty Toby, is here to answer any additional deep dive questions that you may have. In October, we provided an update and received approval for our 2020 course inventory and the career pathways. There are now 71 career pathways. We did provide an Excel document that you had in your board materials for you to review of those pathways. This includes only the state level pathways. There are a large number of local pathways that align local course options to meet specific local business need or programmatic needs. Sometimes those are regional needs. A couple of examples that I think are very commonplace: marine welding, which is a very good paying job if you are thinking of a new career at some point in life. Aquaculture and avionics, just to name a few of those. All of these pathways have been mapped to generally accepted occupational codes, the SOC and the SIP codes, through our partners in Commerce. so district can easily map local business needs to occupational data, to course sequences and programmatic offerings. We also updated you on the program areas and some realignment there, definitions and business rules for our program quality measures as well. In December 2019, we proposed performance standards. We identified those. We shared those with our CTE administrators and how they would be calculated. They were also released to the public for public comment for 60 days from December through February. And then in January, the final draft was produced and sent to the public for public comment. We did have one public comment. We believe that's due to the fact that we had so much other opportunity to really connect with stakeholders. We were very intentional about how we really provided as much opportunity as we could for discussion early on with how this plan will impact North Carolina and students. The one public comment was encouraging us to use this new plan as a way to incorporate performance-based models to measure student achievement and progress. We had planned to do that and incorporated it into the plan of work for this spring. Our new model will be focused on student progress being measured by multiple options called proofs of learning. A proof of learning may be a traditional CTE state assessment, 100-item multiple choice test, via our NC test partners at NC State, a credential, which we'll come back to, or a performance-based measurement. We're in the development stages of this work and hope to brief you on much of that in the coming months. Lastly, in February, we did produce a final draft of the state plan, which you received in your state board materials. Now, I'd like to share some of our final proposals for several key items, first of which is our concentrator definition. This definition is actually not changed since we set it to begin with. The federal government actually wrote the initial definition, and then we were given a little bit of liberty to modify it. And when I asked them about our definition and tried to kind of get us ahead of the game, they reminded me that their job was to review the plan after April 15th. So they said, write the definition, submit the definition, and if we approve it, you can use the definition. So we're very hopeful that this will be one that works very nicely for them. Our definition of a concentrator is a student who has successfully completed a concentrator course in an approved career pathway. We go on to say that a career pathway concentrator course is a second or third level course in a career pathway that builds upon technical skills acquired in a prerequisite course. The CTE Career Pathway Major is an optional benefit a district may choose for students. It highlights students that go above and beyond the concentrator status and complete either an advanced studies research course, a work-based learning opportunity, or potentially an advanced course aligned to the pathway sequence. Here's where I'm very happy that we had our friends from the NC State University earlier today talking a little bit about computer science and some of the work that Dr. Mary Hemphill has done to that regard. And we've been very fortunate that Linda Lay and Karen McPherson from our team have been very involved in that work. And so we're making sure that we're all aligned and moving forward in a positive manner to that end to serve students. So on this slide, what you see demonstrated is a pathway with a second level course as a concentrator. We have our middle grades exploration on the left. We have our pathway courses at the top, concentrator denoted in orange, and major courses to the right under career pathway major. Supplemental technical and supplemental employability skills courses are denoted in the middle. For this pathway, a student may start out in middle school with some of the options such as computer science discoveries, Minecraft coding. They could take Introduction to Office Productivity, or as my daughter is doing, which I think is very, very important at 11 years old, almost 12, 21, is she's in digital literacy, which I think is a very good course for our children to begin their middle grades career. Should they want to continue to pursue that passion, they could enter into our BP14 Python programming course, level 1. If they chose to concentrate, they would take Python Programming 2. If they chose to be a career pathway major, they would complete either with AP Computer Science or our Advanced Studies course, apprenticeship, or internship. It's important to note that CTE now services grade 5 with career awareness, grades 6 through 8 with middle grades career exploration, and 9-12 with career readiness, all in an effort to prepare students for aligned credentials and certifications, an aligned 2-year post-secondary option aligned to career goals, or beyond, should they so choose. Although this first production of our pathway model is a static document, we are nearing the completion of a central system of information for parents, students, teachers, district staff, and the like. The system will allow users to click on any of these courses that you see here, or any of the pathways, and to know every bit of information possible about each course. Things such as course code, status of the course, standards, objectives, aligned industry certifications and credentials, occupational data links, post-secondary pathways, options and links, equipment guides, etc. Effectively a one-stop shop for clear, consistent, and accurate, useful information for all of our stakeholders. Questions so far? This slide demonstrates a pathway with a third level course as its concentrator course. For this pathway, a student would complete Construction Core, which is really focused around the basics of the construction industry, heavy focus on safety. That's paramount when you're dealing with ninth graders potentially using saws and pneumatic tools. And then they would, of course, have the opportunity to go into, in this case, HVAC, HVAC 1, HVAC 2, and then potentially HVAC 3. Another major shift for us is related to performance indicators. As you can see, there are 8 on which we will provide an annual report to the federal government. Where we could, we did utilize existing data from our friends in the Accountability Division. On the next couple of slides, we'll do a deeper dive on the program quality measures, being 5S1 and 5S4, which have replaced our technical skill attainment measure, which was previously required by the federal government. If you think about technical skill attainment, that was our traditional 100-item multiple choice test that has now been, at the federal government, replaced with 5S1 and 5S4. We'll do a deeper dive in just a minute. Questions? So, program quality measures. We'll give you the definitions here, and then we'll go into the calculations very quickly. 5S1, we had to choose between 5S1, 5S2, 5S3. We did choose 5S1. We briefed you on this a couple of times. We did choose post-secondary credentials, given all of the work that we had already done in the state and the work that we had worked with nationally on that. And that is defined as attained post-secondary credentials, which is the percentage of CTE concentrators graduating from high school having attained a post-secondary credential. To maintain some integrity of our programs and some of the work that we had done and the benefits that we had seen accountability-wise from our traditional CTE state assessments, we did also add 5S4, which is an other indicator. That actually gets into participants, and I'll touch on that a little bit more here in just a moment, and gives us a lot of flexibility with how we do that. So 5S1, here's how this is calculated. We have the numerator there, and that is the unduplicated count of CTE concentrators from the current year's cohort who earned a diploma within the expected number of years and attained a recognized post-secondary credential aligned to a course with a career pathway. So I'm going to back up real quickly and show you exactly what we're talking about there. This is a great example. So if a child completes HVAC 2, and they have done the course sequence, they are a concentrator by our definition. Should they earn any of the credentials in Construction Core, HVAC 1, HVAC 2, of which there are about 4 big credentials that they could earn, one of them being OSHA 10. When they graduate, if they're in the number of years that we expected to complete graduation, 4, when they graduate, if they're a concentrator, we report them to the federal government. But we only report them one time. In the past, if they had taken 6 or 7 courses, we reported on them each time they took a course and if they met proficiency. So now for the federal government's concern, it's one time when they graduate as a cohort, if they were a concentrator. Right now, we're thinking that number will probably be somewhere around 65,000 on an annual basis, which is a tick up slightly from about 54,000 that we've seen the past few years. So that's 5S1. Questions on that one? So I'm going to switch gears to 5S4, which now focuses on participants. So as we've traditionally done, we've liked to count students as they matriculate through our system. So 5S4 allows us to do that. And in 5S4, really what we're looking at is we've still got a handful of courses that will still utilize the NC test, the traditional CTE state assessment, where it's appropriate. But what our staff is working really hard on right now is to really take a deep dive into what kind of performance-based measurements we can execute for many of these courses. We recognize that many of our courses are hands-on, experiential-based, personalized, and we want to make sure that children are able to demonstrate that in some form of a performance-based measurement. Questions on this? I do want to address one thing that Dr. Terry Holliday mentioned earlier today. Starting in October of 2019 until late this year, we are taking a closer look at our current inventory of credentials. We're working with Commerce to establish and document new business rules for those credentials and for the bonus tier approval. We're also working with the Credentials of Value Institute, Dr. Terry Holliday, Dr. Jenny Korn from My Future NC, who you heard from, I believe, last month, to better classify credentials relative to the value employers place on each. As credentials are reevaluated and aligned to the courses on a pathway, we will be able to better align those skills to the ones needed for the identified local labor market need. As I mentioned before, one of the most exciting and impactful items our new law requires of us is a comprehensive local needs assessment. You have received a PDF copy of this as a separate attachment in your board materials. It is also located in Appendix F of our complete state plan. The post-secondary version, which they're also required to do one, is in Appendix G if you'd like to see how those aligned. This will help local decision makers really prioritize needs in their local community or region. Local districts will have labor market data available as provided to us by the NC Department of Commerce and the Labor and Economic Analysis Division. They must use this data to inform programmatic offerings in the secondary and post-secondary environments. The requirements of this comprehensive local needs assessment are in front of you here on the screen. First and foremost, they must be completed by eligible recipients at the beginning of the grant period, which is now. They're literally working on this right now, and updated at least once every 2 years. So we're working on the tech side to also adjust for some of that. It should include a review of at least these 5 elements: student performance on the performance indicators that we showed before, the 8, including the subgroups. They also must review that programs are of sufficient size, scope, and quality to meet the needs of all students served and are meeting labor market needs. Progress toward the implementation of CTE programs and the programs of study, or for us, career pathways. Improvement in recruitment, retention, and training of CTE professionals, including underrepresented groups. And lastly, progress toward implementation of equal access to high-quality CTE courses, pathways, and programs of studies for all students, which I think is something we can all get behind. Lastly, I wanted to emphasize some of our work in the employability skills area. Amy Schrader, our career development consultant, and her section chief, Dolores P. Ali, have spent countless hours researching all of the available employability skills programs and offerings by other states, including some of the more popular ones, Work Keys and Career Essentials by Skills USA, which have some significant traction in the business industry sector, I might add. What resulted from that work is these 6: communication, ethics, professionalism, problem solving, resource management, and teamwork. These will be crosswalked and highlighted in all curriculum products moving forward so that teachers can emphasize these to students through authentic activities and projects. We're excited about this. Business and industry, I used to run all of our business and industry groups for every curriculum product that we acquired. And I can tell you, number one, I got to where I just hit it head on and said, okay, today we're not here to talk about employability skills. I know you need them, but what we're here to talk about is the content. And so it's good for me now to say to my business partners, we've heard you, and now we're really doing something about this to help students and teachers. That is all I have. Questions?
Thank you. Board members, you've got a big report, some significant changes. Perkins doesn't get reauthorized every year. I don't know what other states are doing, but I feel like we've got a new way of doing business here around local needs assessments, labor market informed data, clear pathways, career pathway majors. This is something for a state that has a $2 million credential or degree goal by 2030. This hits right in the sweet spot of that effort, and I think this is really important work the department's doing, and I want to make sure you get any questions answered about how it is doing it or any of the details that you saw that you have questions about. This will come back next month for action.
I will stop being amazed at the level of hard work and the consummate level of professionalism and just smart effort that goes into the North Carolina CTE program, 6 through 12, but just for the entire public school system of the state. I just can't say enough good things about the work of CTE professionals.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. We've got a great staff, so thank you, and great support.
Mr. Bristow-Smith.
Quick question. You had made reference to the fact that you were developing course profiles that would be available to parents so they could learn really everything they wanted to know about a course. What is going to be the kind of on-ramp for parents to get access to that information? And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, parents have busy lives, and I wonder if we might be able to somehow dovetail that information with the actual course reference in PowerSchool, so that when they're tapping into PowerSchool and they're seeing their child's grades, they could just click a little hot link and say, oh, I wonder what's going on in that Python course, just to try to connect those two platforms.
We haven't thought about that. We have a marketing package that we're going to start to roll out to share this with parents, but I think that is front and center for every parent that would be really helpful. I appreciate that. It's a great comment.
Thank you, Ms. Bristow-Smith. All right, seeing none, this is discussion this month. Again, we'll come back next month. If you have questions as you review over the next month, we can address them next time in April, and we'll do it for action.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you will, I just have a couple items of consent and one update that I'm going to do from the table here. SLA 8, SLA 9, SLA 10 are consent items tomorrow. We will vote on these. SLA 8 is our policy amendment around English language learners' academic achievement levels. We discussed this last month. This will amend and affirm the state's adoption of the achievement standards, which is required by federal policy. SLA 9 are revisions for advanced courses satisfying graduation requirements. This makes some technical updates due to the GRAD 004 action we took to amend the new graduation high school requirements, but also adds international baccalaureate course to the world history graduation requirement. And then finally, SLA 10, which is our annual report to the General Assembly about cursive writing and multiplication tables. Those are items for content. If there are any questions, we can address them, but those will be before us tomorrow for action. Lastly, we do every month an SBE literacy update. You have a PowerPoint slide deck about the definition, which is the first item in our framework. The department has been working hard, engaging stakeholders across the state on a definition of high-quality reading instruction. They're going to be coming back in April with a recommended definition for us to consider and approve. It is in the document. We're not going to discuss that today. I'd recommend it to you, but we'll have a review and specific definition for next month. We were planning to hear from the pre-K through 12 literacy and educator preparation task force this month. Dr. Ann Clark, who chairs that task force, asked for an additional month to pull that group together, an additional time, not because they are behind, but frankly because they're dealing with some, I think, very constructive recommendations, and they were all part of the event at the Friday Institute where folks from Mississippi and some other folks came in to talk about work being done around the country on this. I think it inspired some additional thinking. So we will get those recommendations which relate to teacher preparation as well as administrative preparation and ongoing professional development and relicensing requirements related to our literacy strategy next month in April. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we're done.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. We'll now break for lunch and reconvene at 1:15. 1:15. I think we do it better on a full stomach.